Translation. Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired, "It is very wonderful that the demon Sishupal merged into the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though extremely envious. This Sayuja Mukti is impossible to attain, even for great transcendentalists. How then did the enemy of the Lord attain it?" Please repeat. Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired, "It is very wonderful that the demon Sishupal merged into the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though extremely envious. This Sayuja Mukti is impossible to attain, even for great transcendentalists. How then did the enemy of the Lord attain it?" Purport. There are two classes of transcendentalists, the Jnanis and the Bhaktas. The Bhaktas do not aspire to merge into the existence of the Lord, but the Jnanis do. Sishupal, however, was neither a Jnani nor a Bhakta. Yet simply by envy of the Lord he attained an exalted position by merging into the Lord's body. Certainly this was astonishing, and therefore Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired about the cause for the Lord's mysterious mercy to Sishupal. Om Agyanat Timarandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharne Nirvase Sasunyavadi Paskya Tadeshatarne Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So the three verses once again. O King, at the Rajasuya sacrifice, Maharaj Yudhisthira, the son of Maharaj Pandu, personally saw Sishupal merge into the body of the Supreme Lord Krishna. Therefore, struck with wonder, he inquired about the reason for this from the great sage Narada, who was seated there. While he inquired, all the sages present also heard him ask his question. Maharaj Yudhisthira inquired, "It is very wonderful that the demon Sishupal merged into the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though extremely envious. This Sayuja Mukti is impossible to attain, even for great transcendentalists. How then did the enemy of the Lord attain it?" So here we have a classic example of a curious person, Maharaj Yudhisthira, inquiring from an authority, a spiritual authority, in this case, Srila Narada Muni. And this we find throughout the Vedic literature, that a qualified student or disciple will approach a qualified spiritual master inquiring for knowledge about something bewildering, in this case something wondrous and apparently incongruous. This chapter is a study of the Supreme Lord, whether he is equal to everyone or not equal to everyone. And it was initiated because it appeared that the Lord was partial to the demigods, because he fought on behalf of the demigods. So in this case, it appears that here he is being partial to a demon. Not just an ordinary demon. Sishupal was the sinful son of Damagosh, and from even before the time that he could speak properly, he would insult and blaspheme the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna. So we find a disciple approaching a spiritual master, certainly in Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna is bewildered what to do when he looks at the so-called enemy, who happen to be his relatives and friends and teachers. So he inquires from Lord Krishna, "Now I'm a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me." And throughout the Bhagavatam also, King Parikshit inquires, "Now I have simply 1 week to live," and he asks Sukadeva Goswami, "So now please tell me what I should hear about, what I should think about, what I should do for these final days of my existence in this body." So it's a glorious process, a process all of us have begun and want to continue throughout our lives, to inquire submissively and render service to the self-realized person, the qualified person, and receive from them the extraordinary gift of transcendental knowledge, which clarifies mysteries and solves wonders, clarifies wonders. So a question may be asked, well, why is it necessary to do this? Why is it necessary for a jiva to approach a qualified spiritual authority? And one answer is that the jiva, without approaching the qualified personality in this way, is sunk in an abyss of ignorance. And due to ignorance, the jiva commits sinful activities, the jiva in the human form. And due to sinful activities, that person suffers. So by nature, we are Ananda, we are full of joy, and we don't want to suffer, we don't want to endure miseries. So it's imperative upon us to inquire from the proper person so that our ignorance can be eradicated, and as a result we'll stop committing sinful activities, and as a result we'll experience our nature, which is to be happy. So every day we are saying this beautiful prayer, which also includes this, Divya Gyan Ride Prokasito. Divya is transcendental, Gyan is knowledge, transcendental knowledge. Ride, within the heart, Prokasito is a very important word. That knowledge is already there in our hearts, but the spiritual master reveals the knowledge that's already existing. And without his help, that knowledge will not be revealed, even though it's already there. Then we also sing Avidya Vinasa Yate. So vidya is knowledge, avidya, ignorance, vinasa, a very strong word, it means destroyed. And then yate is the verb. So the spiritual master, he reveals the knowledge that's already existing in our hearts, and he destroys with this shining lamp of knowledge the ignorance that we're covered by naturally. So it's a great service, an invaluable service, and therefore we offer all our respects to the spiritual master. We devote our lives to trying to please him in reciprocation for this gift that he gives us. So then one may ask, okay, so that's why we receive the knowledge, but how can we receive it? Certainly we sit and hear, but we must hear with faith. Without faith, this gift will remain closed. And Prabhupada explains that to acquire faith, he refers to a verse in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text 39. And he explains that to acquire faith and to allow that faith to develop means we must control our senses. He gives the example, Srila Prabhupada gives the example, that if a person is a patient and goes to a doctor, and the doctor prescribes, okay, so this is your disease, and to regain your health, you must do this, do these things, and you must not do these things. So there are restrictions in diet, and there's medicine. So the patient may say, well, my dear doctor, I have full faith in you, but I really don't want to do these things and not do those things. I'm going to continue with my old habits. So in that case, how can the patient expect to recuperate? You may say you have faith, but in fact, it's just lip service. There's no actual faith. To have faith means that, yes, I will follow the directions, even if it's not palatable, even if it's not to my liking. So similarly, the spiritual master instructs us that we must control our senses. First and foremost, we must control our senses. And therefore he gives us the rules and regulations. And he asks us to chant the Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So by controlling our senses and engaging in the process of devotional service and feeling the results individually, and hearing from the spiritual master regularly, then our faith increases. And as our faith increases by Krishna's grace within our hearts, he destroys the darkness of ignorance with his shining lamp of knowledge. So our knowledge increases, and our faith increases, and our knowledge increases. In this way, it goes on in a very joyful, systematic way, the science of Krishna consciousness. So then what is the result of following this process, one may ask? And it's a good question. If I do this, what can I expect? Well, certainly we can expect knowledge. And knowledge means it's very different from what's considered knowledge in the material world. What's considered knowledge in the material world is actually just amassing information. So you go to college and you can learn about history, and you can learn about personalities, and you can learn a skill of some sort, whether it's medical skill or computer skill or some other skill. So that's amassing information. But once we have knowledge, it means it actually has to affect us to the core. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, in the 13th chapter, from texts 8 to 12, he lists 20 items, and he says, all of these I consider to be knowledge, and anything else is ignorance. And he doesn't list them in a haphazard way, but in a very specific way. In the purport to those verses, Srila Prabhupada explains that he lists them from the very first step, like you're going up a staircase. So the first step, and then all the way up to the 20th step. And the very first step is amanitvam, which means humility. Which means that if a person is not humble, then that person does not have knowledge. That person has information. Actual knowledge means that it affects one to the very core. And one realizes that I'm very insignificant, that whatever understanding I may have is by the grace of my spiritual master. It's by his grace that I can pursue Krishna consciousness. And so in that way, one feels eternally grateful, which is certainly a symptom of humility, and appreciative, and ready to honor all other beings. So knowledge means humility. Then the next item that Krishna mentions in those verses in the 13th chapter is pridelessness. Amanipam adambitam. Means that we understand that whatever I can do, it's by the grace of Krishna. I cannot take credit for these things. It's his grace that I'm able to. Then ahimsa, non-violence. Now one may say, well, Arjuna, under the instruction of Krishna, was fighting and killing people on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. How can we say non-violence? But we have to look past these externals, that he was acting under Krishna's order. And those soldiers that died in Krishna's presence received mukti, liberation. So these externals can be bewildering, as in this verse, struck with wonder. Yudhisthira Maharaj. It's called Vishmita Manha, being struck with wonder. So similarly, this idea of ahimsa, it's more than what meets the eye. But one can actually appear to commit violence and not be committing violence. And one can appear to be non-violent and actually be very violent. So this is part of the idea of acquiring knowledge from the Shastras, to make these distinctions. So adambitam, amanitvam, ahimsa, then also chantir. Chantir is an interesting word. This is perhaps the third or fourth item Krishna mentions, fourth in knowledge. Prabhupada translates it in two ways. One is tolerant, that so many things in this material world will happen to us inevitably, and we must tolerate that. And also he translates it as forgiving, that we forgive the minor transgressions of others. So in that way he goes on, Krishna goes on listing these various items. Another one is arjavam, simplicity. Especially in this age, we have a tendency to become complex, mentally and externally as well. That we acquire so many things, just in the course of living, so many things come that we think we need. And then also mentally, that Prabhupada would sometimes say that his disciples have this idea that they have to expand their knowledge by reading more and more books, but in fact, He also said that if we can simply absorb Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita, we will have enough to make us qualified for going back home, back to Godhead. We don't have to worry our minds trying to acquire esoteric information necessarily that may be beyond our capacity to absorb. Perhaps some can and others cannot, but simplicity is a very important quality either way, because a devotee remains simple. Radhanath Maharaj was speaking about that the other evening, the necessity of simplicity. Then, Acharya Upasanam, to surrender to the lotus feet of the Acharya, is a necessary point in knowledge. And this is required, it's not optional. We have a verse coming up very soon. This is a purport to text 21 of this chapter. The Shastras enjoin tad vigyanartham sagarum eva bigachet. When one is perplexed by the difficult problems of life, to solve them one must approach a guru. So it's not an option. The word there is eva bigachet, one must. It's not that, well, if I feel like it I will, and if I don't feel like it I won't. No, one must approach a guru and surrender to the guru. And then by following the instructions of the guru, again, going back to this verse, the eighth verse of the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna mentions one becomes clean inside and outside, one becomes steadfast. In this way there are 20 items. And of those 20, the most important is unalloyed and uninterrupted service, surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And without that item, the other 19 items become of no real value. So we can be so-called humble or so-called prideless or so-called non-violent and so-called surrendered to a spiritual master. But unless we're engaged in the devotional service of Krishna, uninterruptedly and unalloyedly, then these other items are of no particular value. So it's a science. And at the end of this transcendental list, Krishna mentions absorbing oneself in studying the absolute truth. It's not that we stop at some point and think, no, now it's enough. Now I can do something else. But if we look to the example of our Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, right up to the time that he was on his disappearance bed in Vrindavan in November of 1977, still he was translating, giving his purports to the Srimad Bhagavatam. He said, everything is acting and moving according to the supreme direction of Krishna. This consciousness is Krishna consciousness. So right up to the end, we can expect to be following this process and tasting its sweetness. So the result will be, we can look forward to the results, that we will become free from miseries. Certainly, we'll become free from doubts. We'll become free from fear and anxiety. But beyond all these, beyond becoming free from all these things, we will actually feel the joyfulness of executing Krishna consciousness. Krishna says this knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It's the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion, it is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. So perhaps now there may be so many reasons why we're not feeling that joy, but we should have the confidence that if we go on trying, then gradually, it will come. That joyful feeling will come. So it's a process like no other. Confirmed. So here, the situation here was that Maharaj Yudhisthira wants to practice or engage in this Rajasuya sacrifice, which is an extraordinary sacrifice. And prior to this, Lord Krishna was in his kingdom in Dwarka, and a messenger came to him from thousands, tens of thousands of kings who were imprisoned by imprisoned by Jarasandha. This messenger came and told Krishna that these kings are in a horrible condition. very humiliated, deprived of their kingdom, and trapped by Jarasandha. And this messenger said, these kings, Jai Shri Radha Gokulananda, Jai Shri Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman, Jai Shri Gaurnitai. So these kings were Krishna's devotees, and they were appealing to him that he's the protector of the surrendered soul. So would he please come and save them from their incarceration at the hands of this demon? So Krishna was considering this. He was sitting with all his ministers and advisors. And at the same time, Narada Muni came from Hastinapur. And Narada Muni said that King Yudhisthira, he wanted to engage in this Rajasuya sacrifice, and he requested Krishna to come and be personally present for this. So at that time, at that moment, this suggestion was not widely appreciated because the sages and ministers were all seeing that Krishna should really go and free all these imprisoned kings. So Krishna did a wonderful thing. This also, Vismita Manaha, very wonderful. We can be struck with wonder. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who knows everything, who is the creator of everything and the destroyer of everything and the maintainer of everything. He knows past, present, and future. He's within the heart of every living entity as their dearmost friend. Sitting in his kingdom in Dwarka, he turned to his devotee Uddhava and said, what do you think I should do? So Uddhava was very intelligent, a student of Brihaspati, and he said that certainly you should go and fulfill Maharaj Yudhisthira's request, but in order for Maharaj Yudhisthira to do this Rajasuya sacrifice, he has to defeat all the kings in the area, in the world. So he'll have to defeat Jarasandha. So in that way, Jarasandha will be defeated, and these kings who are imprisoned by him will be freed. By doing this one thing, you will succeed in doing both things. So everyone immediately realized that this was a brilliant solution, and Krishna immediately went to Hastinapur, and he arranged that Bhima would go with him and others, and they defeated in a very unique way. They defeated Jarasandha. Actually, Bhima was fighting with him, and after 28 days, there was no resolution to this fight. These two very powerful Kshatriyas. So Bhima turned to Krishna and said, I'm not sure if I can defeat this king, Jarasandha. So Krishna at that time personally empowered Bhima, and he showed him graphically that Jarasandha was actually born in two parts and combined. And so when Krishna bifurcated a twig, he indicated to Bhima how he could defeat Jarasandha. And having Krishna's power within him and having that little tip, then Bhima succeeded. Jarasandha was defeated. And then all the other kings also recognized the supremacy of Yudhisthira, so the Rajasuya sacrifice continued. And at this Rajasuya sacrifice, one of the first things that has to happen is what's called Agra Puja. Agra means first. So one personality has to be appointed to be worshipped first. And there was some discussion by all the ministers and the sages and the king present, who should that one personality be? And finally Sahadev, the younger brother of Maharaj Yudhisthira, said that it should be Lord Krishna. And he spoke very beautifully about how Lord Krishna is certainly the most qualified in the assembly as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as one who is the source of knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness, and so on. And so they all agreed, and Krishna was worshipped wonderfully by Maharaj Yudhisthira, and the water from his feet was sprinkled on the heads of Yudhisthira Maharaj and his brothers and his wives. And then, at that time, Sishupal, who was becoming increasingly venomous, seeing this, he spoke up, and he said that actually this is a great mistake, this worship of Krishna. Actually, we don't even know what caste Krishna belongs to. We can't even figure out what caste he is. His occupational duty is very vague. Not only that, but he's decided to hide himself in a fort in the ocean. He should have stayed in Mathura and have the good association of the personalities, the luminaries of Mathura. But instead he's moved into the ocean, he's built this fort, and he only comes out to harass the citizens like a dacoit. Sisupal said, "I consider him no better than a crow." So the assembly was filled with Krishna's devotees, and they became increasingly enraged on hearing Sisupal's statements. But we may note with profit that Lord Krishna was completely unprovoked. He's compared to a lion who hears the jackals making their noise. The lion is undisturbed. So similarly, Krishna was completely undisturbed. We mentioned before this quality of tolerance, shantir, forgiveness. Krishna personified that at the sacrifice. However, Bhima, on the other hand, when he wanted Krishna to tell him that he could kill Sisupal, and when Krishna did not tell him that, he shed tears of anger, hot tears. It's a symptom of ecstasy, these tears of anger. So also there was a tremendous amount of ecstatic feelings being evoked by this pastime. That some people left because they could not defend the Lord, so they didn't want to hear blasphemy, so they left. So in this very tumultuous situation, the whole sacrifice was being disturbed. So at that time, Krishna himself used his Sudarshan chakra to separate Sisupal's head from his body in the presence of everyone. And everyone saw the soul come out of the body, the now decapitated body of Sisupal, and enter Krishna's body. It's compared to a meteor that falls to earth. The shining light falls to earth and enters. And so that provoked this question by Maharaj Yudhisthira that we're reading about this morning. And certainly it is wondrous that this happened. It defies logic. But then again, if we look at everything Krishna does, it is wondrous. Maha Adbhutam, greatly wonderful. And in the next verse too, Adbhutam, wonderful. We can say that Krishna, if we understand that he's created everything, he's created this universe with just a spark of his splendor, not just this universe, but unlimited universe. This universe is compared to a mustard seed in a bag of mustard seeds. Mustard seeds are very tiny. They're like a period on this page. And if you have a bag of mustard seeds, what is this universe? And he's created all of them with just a spark of his splendor. And it works so perfectly, this universe, how the sun is rising and the moon is rising. Krishna himself says he enters the moon and he supplies the juice of life to the vegetable. The vegetables are succulent due to the moonlight, and that moonlight is Krishna. And not only that, but he enters into all beings and creates this fire of digestion so that they can digest the food that they eat. And he's in our heart as the most dear friend. He's directing the wanderings of all living beings, and yet he also fulfills our desires. Such a kind friend. He does not force. So the fact that this personality would agree to be the chariot driver of Arjuna, and Arjuna says, "Please take my chariot between the two armies," and Krishna picks up the reins and does that. That is wonderful. That is amazing. That he speaks this knowledge to Vivaswan. That's amazing. That he says, he sends forth generations of men and demigods and says, "Be thou happy by this sacrifice." All these things that the Lord does are extraordinary. So even we can see they have this, what they call this DNA. Hare Krishna. Maybe we've all seen these graphic designs, what they call DNA, within the cell that creates the genetic code from body to body. So it's very beautiful, it's very symmetrical, it's in a spiral. It's a miracle that two people can get together, a husband and a wife, and create a baby, right? You just have this little emulsion from one person and another, and then you have this child forming in the womb, and that child comes out with its own personality, its own desires, its own karma coming with it, and as it grows up it has its own habits, good or bad. So this is a miracle. It's all a miracle. Whatever Krishna does is a miracle. Just if you look, for instance, you look at a big tree. If you've ever had experience with wood is heavy. And you see these huge branches coming out from the trunk. So how does the trunk hold that weight? It's amazing. And take a single leaf, that the leaf is absorbing carbon dioxide from the air and giving out oxygen so that we can breathe. It's extraordinary. I can't do that. We can't do that. So this Adbhutam is part of all of Krishna's creation. So there are a few minutes left. I was asked to speak something about Srila Gopal Bhatta Goswami. It's his appearance day today. And then perhaps we can have a few minutes of discussion. So Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, after he took sannyas, he traveled in South India in the year 1511. And he went to the home of Venkata Bhatt in South India. Venkata Bhatt had a very famous brother, Prabodhananda Saraswati Thakur, and another brother, Tirumala Bhatt. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, during the 4 months of the rainy season, Chaturmas, he stayed in the home of this Venkata Bhatt. And Venkata Bhatt's young son was Gopal Bhatta Goswami. So Venkata Bhatt served Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to his heart's satisfaction. And Gopal Bhatta Goswami also had the extraordinary mercy of serving the Lord to his full satisfaction. He's described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita as the 47th branch of the Chaitanya tree. And he's a great and exalted branch. He always engaged in discourses about love of Godhead in the company of Rupa and Sanatan Goswami. So, he's a resident of Sri Rangam, and his father and his uncles were part of the Ramanuja Sampradaya. Both the father and mother of Gopal Bhatta Goswami were extremely fortunate, for they dedicated their entire lives to the service of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They allowed Gopal Bhatta Goswami to go to Vrindavan, and they gave up their lives thinking of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. When Lord Chaitanya was later informed that Gopal Bhatta Goswami had gone to Vrindavan and met Rupa and Sanatan Goswami, he was very pleased. And he advised Srila Rupa and Sanatan to accept Gopal Bhatta Goswami as their younger brother and to take care of him. Srila Sanatan Goswami, out of his great affection for Gopal Bhatta Goswami, compiled the Vaishnava Smriti named Hari Bhakti Vilas and published it under the name of Gopal Bhatta Goswami. Under the instruction of Srila Rupa and Sanatan, Gopal Bhatta Goswami installed one of the 7 principal deities of Vrindavan, the Radha Raman deity. The Sevites, priests of the Radha Raman temple, belonged to the Gaudiya Sampradaya. So one note is that when Prabhupada was establishing the Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan, he asked the person who was responsible for that department, who was Jamuna Devi Dasi, to study deity worship at this Radharaman temple. Prabhupada considered it the example of deity worship for himself and for ISKCON. So she did that. She went to the Radharaman temple of Gopal Bhatta Goswami in Vrindavan, and from there she learned so many aspects of deity worship that she brought home to ISKCON. So it's about 8:30. Perhaps if there's a few minutes of discussion on these various points.